What's good? It's Woog. If there was one breakthrough story in boxing for the year 2023, it is Saudi Arabia and its ability to do things in boxing that no promoter can. We've got Deontay Wilder, 43 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw, taking on Joseph Parker, 33 wins and 3 losses. Now, Deontay Wilder versus Joseph Parker, this could have probably happened without Saudi involvement. But when you see the bigger picture shaping up, this fight between Wilder and Parker, and then the other main event on this same fight card, December 23rd, Anthony Joshua versus Otto Wallin, this is supposed to shape up and then lead to Deontay Wilder versus Anthony Joshua. Pretty much the heavyweight fight. I know that Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk is scheduled a couple months down the road, but Wilder versus Joshua, or should I say perhaps Anthony Joshua versus Deontay Wilder, is probably the heavyweight fight that has been the most attractive to the boxing public out of any heavyweight fight in the post-Klitschko era, we'll say. And if you prefer a fight between like Fury and Usyk and you're more attractive to that matchup, I mean, I can't wait for that one. Or if there's any permutation of the top fighters in the heavyweight division that you see as being a more attractive fight than Joshua versus Deontay Wilder, okay, that's fine. But the way that I see it, AJ versus Wilder in the post-Klitschko era has been the heavyweight fight that we have been wanting to see. And that fight would take Saudi Arabia involvement. And so this Wilder versus Parker fight is supposed to be a stepping stone to that AJ versus Wilder showdown, as is AJ versus Otto Wallin. So Wilder and Anthony Joshua pretty much have to win their respective fights for AJ and Wilder to come together. I mean, they even floated out that date in March as being the date that it would happen, which it's pretty interesting because, you know, Deontay Wilder hasn't been in the ring since October of 2022. Before that, it was October of 2021. So Wilder fought 1 fight in 2020, 1 fight in 2021, 1 fight in 2022, and then this upcoming fight against Parker is going to be Wilder's first fight of 2023. And, you know, I'm supposed to believe that Wilder is going to fight Parker in December, and then 3 months later, not a year later, 3 months later, get back in the ring against Anthony Joshua. Look, I got to see it to believe it, but this is what they're talking about. And Saudi Arabia just seems to be able to do a bunch of things that no boxing promoter can do. Like, you know, if Dimitri Bivol, who's also on this undercard, he's going to be fighting Lyndon Arthur. If he beats Lyndon Arthur and Artur Beterbiev beats Callum Smith, I don't think it's beyond reason to think that Saudi Arabia won't pull together Artur Beterbiev versus Dimitri Bivol. Can't you see that one shaping up as well? It might not be a main event of one of these mega cards, but I can see it happening on one of these mega cards undercard. And I mean, we just got Tyson Fury versus Francis Ngannou. So yeah, keep your eyes glued to what Saudi Arabia is doing in the boxing realm, because it seems like they could, you know, wave a magic wand and make all of our boxing dreams come true. What do they say? Queens get the money? Nah, Saudis got the money. So let's talk Deontay Wilder versus Joseph Parker. Deontay Wilder, he's been very half active. I mean, besides the Tyson Fury trilogy and then the Dominic Brazil and, the second Luis Ortiz fight in between the first and second fights against Fury, Deontay Wilder has been very half active in the past few years. And he has fought 1 round in the past 2 years, and that was a first round knockout over Robert Helenius. So a lot of the questions that we had after his brutal knockout losses against Tyson Fury in the second and third fight of that trilogy, questions about Deontay Wilder's durability going forward, his chin and so forth, those questions weren't answered in that first round knockout over Robert Helenius. I mean, Deontay Wilder did what he is capable of doing, and that is putting your lights out with 1 punch. And so that's what occurred versus Helenius. So there is still a lot of question, in my opinion, over where Deontay Wilder is career-wise at 38 years old now. And I feel like people are treating this like it's a foregone conclusion that he's going to beat Joseph Parker. But to that I say, if he does beat Joseph Parker, which he's the favorite in doing so, he's got a great chance with that power of doing a lot of damage to Joseph Parker. So it's very possible. You can even say it's likely that he beats Joseph Parker. But if he beats Joseph Parker, you could argue that that might be Deontay Wilder's greatest career win. As crazy as that sounds, because, people talk of Deontay Wilder as, like a Hall of Famer, and that's because he held the WBC belt for 5 years. But if you look at his, title defenses and you look at his resume in terms of who he's beaten, the only other guy that he's beaten, and this is assuming that he beats Joseph Parker, the other guy that you could compare that win to would be Luis Ortiz. And he did stop Luis Ortiz twice, but those are the two biggest feathers in his cap. You could argue that that the biggest feather in his cap is fighting to a draw with Tyson Fury in the first fight, that controversial split draw. That might be Deontay Wilder's greatest accomplishment. Now, the magnitude of the trilogy with Tyson Fury kind of lifted all boats because the trilogy was so monumental, so to speak. And that increases, even though he lost 2 out of those 3 fights, and some people with their own 2 eyes thought that he lost all 3 fights against Fury, but that trilogy did a lot to enhance and boost Deontay Wilder's legacy. But in terms of just on paper, who you beat and lost to, yeah, it's Luis Ortiz. And then you'd have to go all the way to maybe Bermane Stiverne the first time. The second Bermane Stiverne was a post-prime Bermane Stiverne. But when Deontay Wilder earned the WBC championship against Bermane Stiverne, who was the first person to take Deontay Wilder the 12-round distance. And at the time, I thought that Deontay Wilder was actually skill building, where he was doing things other than throwing his hard right hand. I mean, he outboxed Bermane Stiverne in that one. And you could argue that there's been a boxing sweet science regression in Deontay Wilder since that first win over Bermane Stiverne. It's become increasingly feast or famine with Deontay Wilder. But yeah, he doesn't have a deep resume in terms of the guys that he's beaten. Chris Arreola. So aside from Luis Ortiz, Robert Helenius, Bermane Stiverne, Chris Arreola, it's, Gerald Washington and Johan Duhaupas and Artur Szpilka, guys of that level. So it's really an interesting career with Deontay Wilder. Dominic Breazeale, that's another one that's, kind of on that Gerald Washington-ish level, just a slight tier below Chris Arreola. So it's not a crazy accomplished resume in terms of the guys that he's beaten. Luis Ortiz, and if he beats Joseph Parker, that'll satisfy one of those A-, B+ level wins, right? I mean, what we were hoping for to build up to Wilder versus Anthony Joshua was Andy Ruiz. We wanted to see that because they were both, premier boxing fighters, and it seemed like a fight that could get made. But I mean, if you look at what Andy Ruiz has done since that win over Anthony Joshua, that huge upset, I kind of feel like Andy Ruiz has been playing himself a bit. And it's really a bad look when you see how inactive he's been, and he hasn't had any, other career boosting or legacy boosting wins since that, besides, he beat Chris Arreola, and then he beat like a 40-something-year-old Luis Ortiz, which is a fight that I was wanting to see for some time. So Andy Ruiz did do that, but it's really been a disappointing run for Andy Ruiz. I just feel like it's been a bit of wasted talent, given how good he was, around the time that he was walking down and stopping Dimitrenko and guys like that. Now, Joseph Parker was the first guy to beat Andy Ruiz. That's actually how Joseph Parker earned a share of the title. It was a vacant WBO heavyweight belt that Joseph Parker earned, beating Andy Ruiz, and he was for a long time until the rematch between Andy Ruiz and Anthony Joshua. For a long time, Ruiz's only loss was to Joseph Parker. So Joseph Parker is no slouch, and he was the first guy to take Anthony Joshua the 12-round distance. That's how Joseph Parker lost his title, was in a decision loss to Anthony Joshua. And so Joseph Parker, he had been hovering around that, A- level as a heavyweight, but every time he looked like he had an opportunity to exceed expectations and to really put a stamp on his career, he just came up a bit short, like in that decision loss against Anthony Joshua, which was Joseph Parker's first career loss. And the one that I really feel hurt his legacy was the loss against Dillian Whyte. Like, that was really the one where it's like, man, you should have gotten that one. If you wanted to prove yourself as an A-, maybe A-ish level fighter, you've got to beat Dillian Whyte, because Dillian Whyte's another one of those guys who was like a, top 4 to top 7 heavyweight, just outside of that Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua, and then later Alexander Usyk. But outside of that uppermost tier, you had Dillian Whyte, Andy Ruiz, Joseph Parker, for a long time, Alexander Povetkin, guys like that, Luis Ortiz. And so Joseph Parker did beat Andy Ruiz, but he lost against Dillian Whyte. And he then, before that, he lost against Anthony Joshua. So Joseph Parker's always been seen as a very good fighter, but not a great fighter. Not somebody who you could really say is a bona fide top 3 heavyweight. You get what I'm saying? I remember, Richard Dwyer, online boxing analyst, for a long time had been pretty high on Joseph Parker. He thought Joseph Parker was probably going to beat Anthony Joshua. But again, Joseph Parker just comes up a bit short in his biggest moments. He does have a win over Carlos Takam, and he's got a win over Hughie Fury, and he's got a win over Demirchenko, the same guy that Andy Ruiz stopped. Joseph Parker stopped. And I will say, after those back-to-back decision losses to Anthony Joshua and to Dillian Whyte, a fight where, Joseph Parker got dropped a couple times, one time legitimately, another time with like a part of Dillian Whyte's arm. It really got to be a rough fight, and Joseph Parker did rally back to really almost stop Dillian Whyte in the final round. Dillian Whyte was holding on for dear life by the end of that thing, but Dillian Whyte came out with the unanimous decision win. And this kind of, added to the reputation of Joseph Parker that, he's just not mean enough in there. He takes too long to get going. He doesn't show enough aggression. He's too willing to smile and tap gloves after rounds, stuff like that, when you really want to see a bit more of a killer instinct. But after those back-to-back losses for Joseph Parker, he did go on a nice, I think it was a 6-fight winning streak where, he beat lower level guys like Alexander Flores and Alex Leopai, and then won against Shondell Winters. And then he got higher quality wins against Junior Fa, who's also going to be on this, December 23rd undercard. He's going to be fighting Frank Sanchez. I'm probably going to do a quick preview, probably like a 1-minute prediction video or something like that on that one. But Joseph Parker then, he beat Junior Fa, and then he beat Derek Chisora in back-to-back fights. The first one was a razor-thin one that really could have gone either way, where Derek Chisora dropped Joseph Parker like in the first 10 seconds of that fight, and it ended up being a rough and tumble fight. A split decision win for Joseph Parker, but then in the rematch, he really, left no doubt. He put a beating on Derek Chisora in that rematch. So, Joseph Parker did string together some nice wins after those back-to-back losses. Then he fought Joe Joyce, who at the time was still looking like the juggernaut. This is before Joe Joyce ran into Zhilei Zhang. This is when Joe Joyce was looking indestructible, stopping Daniel Dubois before Alexander Usyk did. And Joe Joyce just put that, that relentless pace, was able to just walk through Joseph Parker's power punches. I mean, Joseph Parker came in a little bit bigger than he normally is. He's usually like around 225 to 230 something. He came in a few pounds bigger than that, but he just didn't have enough heat to keep Joe Joyce from walking forward, walking through his punches, and just putting a beating on Joseph Parker en route to knocking him out in the 11th round. It was a really bad beatdown to where I was wondering, is Joseph Parker ever going to be the same fighter after that beating, bludgeoning at the hands of Joe Joyce? But, after that, Joseph Parker got right back in there, and he's got another string of 3 wins, again, against lesser fighters, but he has been active. So what am I expecting to see between Deontay Wilder and Joseph Parker? Deontay Wilder, like I said, he is a bit feast and famine, and not even a bit feast or famine. If he's not hurting you badly, there's a good chance he's losing that round. That's the type of fighter that Deontay Wilder has kind of evolved into. Feast or famine, whereas Joseph Parker is a pretty good round winner. And I do think that Joseph Parker hits hard enough, maybe not to stop Joe Joyce in 2022, but I think that he can do damage and hurt Deontay Wilder. And, he is a pretty defensively responsible fighter. He's a pretty quick boxer. He likes to jump in and out of the pocket. He's somewhat elusive, but he's not super hard to find in there, but he does have a, pretty good head movement. He puts his punches together pretty well. Again, sometimes he's a little too, reluctant to let his, power punches go. But I do think that in recent years, he has been willing to slug it out a bit more than when he was in his 20s. Like, if you look at Joseph Parker versus Andy Ruiz, you'll see what I'm talking about, with Joseph Parker kind of, fighting a more defensive-based, defensive-oriented style. So what style of fight should Joseph Parker be fighting against Deontay Wilder? You don't want to just be standing out there in like that long range where Deontay Wilder could let that right hand go, unless you've already game planned on how to slip it and then make Wilder pay. You would think that you want to come in a little bit on Wilder, mix it up a bit, perhaps ambush him, kind of box intelligently from the outside like Luis Ortiz did in both of their fights. Now, keep in mind, Luis Ortiz won several rounds in their first fight, and he won just about every round in the second fight until he got knocked out. It's just that being in there with Deontay Wilder, if he still is the Bronze Bomber, if he hasn't had like a precipitous drop in his performance ability, 36 minutes is a long time to have to survive against somebody who could hit like Wilder. Even the guy who beat Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, got dropped twice in 2 different fights against Deontay Wilder. There is not a guy who has fought Deontay Wilder who has not been dropped by Deontay Wilder. Think about that. There is still not a fighter who has fought Deontay Wilder who has not been dropped by Deontay Wilder. That's remarkable. That's pretty crazy. So I think that, look, I don't think that Deontay Wilder is just going to spark Joseph Parker in the first or second round. If he does that, incredible, because nobody does that to Joseph Parker. Again, he took Anthony Joshua the 12-round distance, the first to do so. And it took Joe Joyce 11 rounds of fighting that juggernaut style to stop Joseph Parker. Joseph Parker is durable. I mean, Joe Joyce is the only guy to have stopped Joseph Parker. And again, it was in the 11th round. So he's durable. He's a good boxer. He's got pretty quick hands, relatively, pretty good hand speed. I don't know if he's as good an athlete or as fleet of foot as he was when he was in his mid-20s. Like, Joseph Parker might only be 31 years old, but he's got to be an old 31 just because of how long he's been fighting at an elite level. I mean, you would have guessed probably that Joseph Parker's like in his mid to late 30s, but no, he's still only 31 years old, which means that he was like 23 years old when he was fighting and beating Carlos Takam and Andy Ruiz. He was like 23, 24. So yeah, I consider Joseph Parker an old 31. Not that he's a shot fighter. I don't think he's a shot fighter, but he just has had a lot of tough fights against a lot of elite and near elite opponents. So I think that Joseph Parker is going to have some early round success against Wilder. I even think that he might shake Wilder up a bit. I mean, maybe not to the degree that Luis Ortiz did in their first fight when he had Wilder, pretty badly wobbled and on the verge of getting dropped. Like, Wilder looked like he was out on his feet in that first fight against Luis Ortiz. In fact, there was a controversial moment after that where after, the between rounds, because Wilder was kind of saved by the bell. So then the ref called Wilder over to look at the doctor to give him, basically he gave him additional time to recover in a moment where he was badly hurt by Luis Ortiz in that first fight. So maybe Wilder doesn't get hurt that badly against Joseph Parker, but maybe something more like, the difficult moment that Wilder had against Eric Molina. Eric Molina had Wilder pretty badly hurt before getting stopped. So I think that Joseph Parker will have some early round success. Keep in mind, even when Deontay Wilder fought Gerald Washington, Deontay Wilder lost those early rounds, and then he stopped Gerald Washington. There's just this pattern in Deontay Wilder's career: give up a few rounds, knock the guy out. There's been a lot of that. In fact, it was that, I think that fight against Gerald Washington was the first time that I really looked at Deontay Wilder as a feast or famine fighter. Whereas, the fight against Chris Arreola, I thought that Wilder was winning some rounds where he wasn't dropping Arreola. But, even as Joseph Parker kind of gets in and beats Deontay Wilder up a bit, it's interesting because you don't see Deontay Wilder get hit cleanly a bunch. And sometimes when he gets hit really cleanly, he gets hurt, right? He got hurt, in the times that I just mentioned. I think that Joseph Parker is going to hit him pretty cleanly a few times. Again, if Wilder just sparks him in the first or second round, then again, Deontay Wilder would have earned his best or second best. That would be a top 2 win for Deontay Wilder. I don't think it's going to happen super early because this is Joseph Parker that he's dealing with, an A-, B+, A-ish level fighter. And so, you know, what does that mean for Deontay Wilder? Like, a lot of people are assuming that Wilder's going to beat Parker and that AJ's going to beat Wallin. And I'm like, yo, not so fast. Not so fast. Joseph Parker hits about every opponent that he fights pretty cleanly. Like, but the fight that makes me think, maybe Joseph Parker isn't ready to deal with the 6'7" Deontay Wilder. Because if you look at some of Joseph Parker's tallest opponents, look at the one against Junior Fa. That was a very lackluster, not quite a boring fight, but it was a frustrating fight to watch just because it was a bit of an ugly fight. And I thought that Junior Fa fought Joseph Parker pretty evenly. Like, when they were going into the scorecards, I didn't know who won that fight between Parker and Fa. And Fa is about 6'6", almost 6'7". He's a tall fighter. And I'm just thinking, if Joseph Parker a couple years ago had that type of difficulty with Fa, one knockout loss later for Joseph Parker, maybe he isn't able to get in that super long reach of Deontay Wilder, because Deontay Wilder is pretty good at taking that step back and kind of controlling range. Not that he's got a super active jab or that he's doing a ton with his hands to keep you outside, but just the threat of the right hand. And yes, the jab. And Deontay Wilder will sometimes throw a jab, and he'll sometimes throw a jab to the body. Every now and then when he gets super comfortable, which isn't in every fight, but when Wilder's super comfortable, you'll see him unleash a left hook. But it's not reliable enough, and he's usually not throwing it because he's just not comfortable enough to let that punch go. I thought that if he could develop a more educated left hand with the jab and with the hook, he could really be problems. But hey, it is what it is when it comes to Deontay Wilder. I don't think too much is going to change at 38 years old. So, you know, Joseph Parker might have some interesting moments. He might win some rounds. I just don't... It's kind of tough seeing this fight go the distance, isn't it? Unless Joseph Parker fights a super cautious fight and it ends up being an absolute bore and Deontay wins a decision from the outside like he did against Bermane Stiverne, who doesn't have the feet of Joseph Parker. So I don't see that type of fight materializing. Joseph Parker has an outside shot at hurting and maybe even stopping Wilder. That is within the realm of possibility. If he could, land on Wilder cleanly and somewhat often, he can stop Wilder. I just think that there's more of a likelihood that at some point Wilder badly hurts and eventually stops Joseph Parker. I was tempted to go Wilder via decision in a very lackluster style fight. But I'm going to go Wilder via stoppage, and not a super late stoppage. I don't think it's going to be like rounds 9 through 11. I think it's going to be more like rounds 5 through 7. But I do think that Wilder still will show the ability to uncork that devastating nuclear bomb of a right hand. Feast or famine, perhaps. Like, I don't know who will be up on the scorecard at the time of the knockout, but I think that Deontay Wilder will pull this one off against Joseph Parker, which will be remarkable, just to be able to persist with that style and to keep on knocking these guys not named Tyson Fury out. That's just incredible. And I think that Wilder has another one of those in him, even at 38 years old. So I'm going to go with the very inactive, having fought one round in the past 2 years. This could really come back to hurt Wilder. I would not be shocked if Wilder loses that fight, because sometimes, the cliff happens when the cliff happens. And then, the guy that you were almost certain was going to win the fight just isn't the same guy when he enters the ring or gets badly hurt and is unable to do what we're normally used to seeing them do. That is very possible. I'm just going to go with Deontay Wilder via mid-round stoppage, 5th through 7th round, something like that, against the very good but just shy of great Joseph Parker. Let me know what you think about this one in the comments. What do you think about this card? I'm going to do a lot of content on this fight card. And what do you think about Saudi Arabia's involvement in basically being able to wave the magic wand, throw money at the boxing landscape, and make some of these dream come true fights actually happen? And do you think that Wilder will win and that Anthony Joshua will win and that we will eventually get Deontay Wilder versus Anthony Joshua? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.